Mr. Stone, your hearing is deteriorating rapidly.
The Sound of Metal was released in 2019, directed by Darius Marder, starring Riz Ahmed, Olivia Cook, and Paul Raci. The film follows metal drummer Ruben as he loses his hearing and learns to come to terms with that. It was one of my favourite films I watched last year, with amazing performances and incredible camera work. But the main part that stood out to me was the sound design, and the film uses sound to assist the narrative.
Yo, you sound checked yet?
No, not looking forward to it. Terrified. Half my shit is
In a lot of scenes from the film, we hear things how Ruben, the main protagonist, hears them. Instead of the audio just sounding quieter in these scenes, everything sounds more dull and muffled, like we're in Ruben's head. But how do they do this? 1 year before production started on The Sound of Metal, director Darius Marder and supervising sound editor Nicholas Becker did extensive research into how hearing loss sounds, with Becker saying, "We spoke with audiologists and scientists who are working in that field. I also brought Darius to an anechoic chamber to actually experience, physically, the idea of silence itself." After they had finished researching what it would sound like, Becker then went on to get the equipment necessary. "I created different stethoscope mics and very sensitive mics," he says. "I was also able to build a small microphone that you could put in your mouth without it being broken." This microphone was used to record all the internal sounds, like blood rushing, tendons and bones moving, to recreate the internal noise that would be heard by a deaf person. They also use a low-pass filter in post-production, removing the high-end frequencies and making it so only the low-end frequencies remain to make things sound more muffled, like you're hearing now. In these scenes where we are hearing things from Ruben's perspective, it puts the audience right in his head, and when we see him realizing he can't hear, we as an audience resonate with him, as the fear of losing your hearing is something anyone can relate to, making the scenes all the more impactful. Throughout the film, there is a big theme of silence, and the correlation between that and finding peace with yourself. In the first part of the film, we see Ruben's journey of coming to terms with being deaf as he becomes more and more comfortable with it. In one part of the film, Ruben learns sign language and lives in a deaf community. In these scenes, there is almost no dialogue, as most of the characters are communicating through sign language. But a part that really stands out to me in these scenes is that none of it is subtitled. So unless you know sign language, you have to work out what's happening through context clues. So in doing this without saying anything, it makes the audience see the film how a deaf person would find it when consuming most types of media.
Here we go.
However, after being reminded of the life he used to live, he sells everything that he owns in order to get a surgery for an implant that will allow him to hear again.
Say again?
But after he gets the surgery, whilst he can hear again, everything sounds loud, screechy and metallic. In one of the most impactful scenes in the film, Ruben then goes to tell Joe, the man running the deaf community, that he got the implant, where he says this.
Yo, if I disappear, like, who cares? Nobody cares, man. Seriously. Yo, and that's okay. That's life. That's life. No, for real, okay? It just passes. It just fucking passes.
I wonder, all these mornings you've been sitting in my study. Sitting. Have you had any moments of stillness? Because you're right, Ruben. The world does keep moving. It can be a damn cruel place. But for me, those moments of stillness, that place, that's the kingdom of God.
In this scene, we also clearly see how Ruben is struggling as he is seemingly undone with the progress that he made in coming to terms with himself. As through getting the implant, he is running away from the silence, being deaf, and away himself.
Cet amour me tue encore, mon amour, je suis
After this, Ruben tries to go back to his old life and goes to visit his girlfriend Lou in Paris, who he hasn't seen since joining the deaf community. And whilst he has everything back like his girlfriend and his hearing, both are not the same as they once were. In these scenes, we see how Lou has changed as a person in the time they've put apart. This acts as a contrast to Ruben, who was given everything he had to try and go back to the way things were before he was deaf, instead of accepting himself and changing as a person. This all leads into what I believe is the most impactful scene in the film, the ending scene, where Ruben goes on a walk through Paris. We hear through his perspective again, but this time through the implant. Everything is loud, metallic, and overwhelming, like children playing in the street and a church bell ringing. Ruben sits down on a bench and takes off the implant, living in the silence and finally accepting himself.